Welcome to the Neo-Nexus. Tonight, we unpack a Supreme Court decision with enormous implications for the US and the world. The Supreme Court struck down the Trump-era tariff framework, sending shockwaves through the global economy. This ruling ends years of contentious trade disputes and forces a nationwide reevaluation of how America engages with its trading partners. For years, tariffs were praised as protection for American industries and criticized as a tax on consumers. The court's reversal marks a pivotal moment, turning the page on protectionist trade policies and redefining relationships, supply chains, and prices on everyday goods. The decision stems from legal challenges arguing the executive branch overstepped its authority by imposing broad import taxes without direct congressional approval. The justices clarified who holds the ultimate authority to levy taxes and regulate commerce, Congress, or the president, setting a powerful new precedent. In this broadcast, we'll break down what tariffs are, the legal reasoning behind the verdict, the immediate economic fallout, and the broader geopolitical implications, especially for US-China relations. The story is just beginning and we'll guide you through every step. To understand the Supreme Court's ruling, let's clarify what a tariff is. A tariff is a tax on imported goods, making foreign products more expensive and encouraging consumers to buy American. Historically, tariffs generated government revenue, but today they're mainly used to protect domestic industries from foreign competition. Supporters say tariffs defend against unfair trade practices like foreign subsidies and dumping. Critics argue tariffs act as a hidden tax on consumers, raising prices on everything from electronics to groceries. The extra cost is usually passed down the supply chain, ultimately hitting American shoppers. Tariffs often spark retaliation. Other countries impose their own tariffs, escalating into trade wars. This tit-for-tat harms exporters like American farmers and disrupts global supply chains. The result: economic uncertainty, higher costs, and slower global growth. That's why today's ruling is so significant. It changes the rules of the game. The tariffs at the heart of today's decision began in 2018 under the Trump administration, citing national security to impose steep tariffs on steel and aluminum, even on allies. This marked a sharp break from decades of US free trade policy. The administration soon targeted China, accusing it of unfair trade practices and launching broad tariffs on hundreds of billions in Chinese goods. While some US metal producers benefited, many manufacturers faced soaring costs, passing them on to consumers. China and other nations retaliated, targeting key American exports like soybeans and pork, devastating US farmers. The result: a prolonged trade war, global market disruption, and economic uncertainty that lingered for years. The Supreme Court's ruling now brings this turbulent chapter to a close. But how did the legal battle unfold? The Supreme Court agreed to hear American Institute for International Steel vs. United States, a case challenging the president's authority to impose broad tariffs under national security laws. Plaintiffs argued the executive branch overreached, using national security as a pretext for economic protectionism, powers reserved for Congress. In a 6-3 decision, the court sided with the challengers, ruling that national security cannot be interpreted so broadly as to justify sweeping tariffs. The majority opinion clarified that only a direct, credible threat to national defense justifies such measures. The ruling declared the steel and aluminum tariffs unconstitutional and signaled that similar unilateral actions like tariffs on China would face intense scrutiny. This decision restores significant trade authority to Congress, demanding open debate and legislative approval for major trade actions. The separation of powers has been reasserted. The implications are immediate and far-reaching. For American businesses relying on imports, the ruling is an instant tax cut. Tariffs on Chinese electronics and aluminum are gone, slashing costs overnight. Companies can lower prices, invest in growth, or boost profits after years of squeezed margins. For consumers, prices on everything from TVs to shoes should gradually fall, easing cost of living pressures. This disinflation gives households more purchasing power. However, domestic industries once shielded by tariffs, like steel and aluminum, now face renewed global competition, which could mean lower prices but also job losses if they can't adapt. The ruling injects certainty into the business environment, encouraging long-term investment and stability. Years of unpredictable trade policy made planning difficult. Now, businesses can move forward with confidence. This stability is crucial for economic growth and job creation. Main Street America stands to benefit from a more predictable open market. The Supreme Court's decision is a game-changer for U.S.-China relations, effectively neutralizing the main weapon in America's trade arsenal. With tariffs overturned, China is likely to roll back its own retaliatory tariffs, reopening markets for American farmers and exporters. This could provide a much-needed boost to U.S. agriculture and export industries. The ruling pushes both nations away from confrontation and back to the negotiating table. Without tariffs, the U.S. must pursue trade goals through diplomacy and international cooperation, not unilateral punishment. This shift could stabilize the relationship, but deep-seated issues, like intellectual property and market access, remain. The end of the tariff war doesn't end economic competition, it simply moves the rivalry to new arenas. Expect more focus on boosting U.S. competitiveness through investment in technology, education, and strategic alliances. The era of direct tariff battles may be over, but the contest for economic and technological dominance continues. The rules have changed, but the stakes remain high. America and China now face a new kind of competition, one shaped by law, diplomacy, and innovation. This Supreme Court ruling does more than end a set of tariffs. It fundamentally reshapes American trade policy. By limiting the executive branch's power, the court returns authority over trade to Congress, demanding open debate and consensus. Future presidents will need explicit congressional approval for major tariff actions. This shift means more voices, industry, labor, consumers, will shape trade policy, making abrupt unilateral moves less likely. The judiciary's willingness to check executive power sets a new standard for oversight. The long-term legacy, a rebalancing of power, more predictable trade policy, and a new chapter in America's global economic engagement. The debates over free trade and protectionism will continue, but the constitutional ground rules are now clear. America's approach to global trade has changed permanently.